Hi everyone, welcome back to AP Psychology with me, Miss Baines, your teacher, where you can take advantage of being able to pause and rewind me as I deliver you our latest content. So go ahead and grab those felt tip markers, get yourself nice and comfy, and of course don't forget your binder notes that go in lockstep order with this video called Unit 7, Video 8, Psychoanalytic Theory of Personality, Parts 1 and 2, which can be found on pages 14 through 16 in your binder notes. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so as you can see with our learning targets today, it's all about psychoanalysis, the theory of psychoanalytical personality. Yes, here he is, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Get ready to blow your mind. Okay, so for this unit, each one is looking at a different perspective and theory of personality. So the first one we're going to look at is psychoanalytic, which becomes psychodynamic later in the 20th century, and how they view the personality, which is a really interesting take on it. It's varied, and Freud is a highly controversial figure in psychology, right? And there's a lot of stuff that were kind of weird, and a lot of newer analysts and psychiatrists didn't take him very seriously, but he is the founding father of what becomes essentially talk therapy. So we have to give him credit where credit is due, and he's one of the most important people in psychology because of what we have today is known as psychodynamic talk therapy. Okay, so Freud. In his clinical practice, Freud encountered patients suffering from nervous disorders whose complaints could not be explained in terms of purely physical causes. He referred to this as hysteria and said that there has to be a psychological cause for the ailments that he was seeing in his patients. From this, he developed the first comprehensive personality theory ever, right? A lot of the things are in our unconscious mind. A reservoir of mostly unacceptable thoughts, wishes, feelings, and memories, okay? Freud would ask his patients to say whatever came to their mind. We call this free association, okay? He used it in order to tap into the unconscious, right? That of which we are not even aware is inside of our psyche, okay? Okay, so psychoanalysis is the process of free association, right? Your chain of thoughts, whatever comes to mind, right? He believed that this led to painful or embarrassing unconscious memories. Once these memories were retrieved and released, Freud believed that the patient would always feel just a little bit better, felt a little bit lighter, and could start to talk about what it was that they were experiencing that felt painful, okay? Here's a harmless little example. Write down everything that you say when I say the following words. Banana, skyscraper, cigarette, French fry, pencil. If I say French fries, what comes to mind, right? Whatever you say, whatever comes right out, right? When I say French fries right now, and you say it out loud to your analyst, he will have a list of other words or play off of the words that you're giving him, and then eventually he'll tap into those chain of thoughts, or you'll start saying words that have deeper meaning to the analyst. Okay, he believed in the three parts of the mind. The iceberg analogy, okay, the iceberg being the largest and most important part down here underwater. Okay, so the parts under the water are unconscious thoughts, feelings, dreams, and untapped parts of your personality. Okay, so if you're writing an FRQ, you're not going to necessarily say the hidden part is the iceberg part, right? Unless you can explain that it's the unconscious part of the mind or the psyche, you're not going to get the point. Okay, so the iceberg analogy is that this part is hidden, right? You want to tap into that stuff by using dream analysis, free association, stream of consciousness. Right? The idea is that this is the part that we hide from our awareness. It's out of our awareness. The belief is, though, that the hidden parts can dictate our behavior, just like the bottom of the iceberg very much dictates the top of the mountain up here, or the tip of the iceberg, right? That's the conscious part, right? The tip of the iceberg is the consciousness, what you're currently aware of. And this part down here at the water level is the pre-consciousness, okay? So say you're on the Titanic and you're in the water. The part of the iceberg that you can see is the pre-consciousness, right? The information is not in your conscious awareness, but you can easily retrieve it once you start talking about it, okay? It's accessible. Let's just say that the word George Washington, and the first thing that you say is President of the United States, but you're not thinking of that in that moment. Right? How does the unconscious influence us? Well, the latent content of dreams, which we talked about back in Unit 5, being the symbolic meaning of our dream. Freud wrote an entire dictionary of the unconscious of dream analysis. So if you ever want to know what your dreams symbolize, you can go ahead and read that. It's very interesting. It's a difficult read, I won't lie to you, but once you get the lingo down, I'm telling you, it's fascinating. Okay, so the unconscious thoughts that are surfacing, right? A really good example is he has a slip of the tongue when in science class and reading out loud and read something from, say, a science textbook. And all of a sudden the word organism comes up as you're reading, and a prepubescent boy in, say, the 6th grade all of a sudden says orgasm, okay? He has a slip of the tongue, a kind of interesting thing, right? Let's look at the personality structure. The id, the ego, and the superego. Think of the superego as the angel on this shoulder, and the id as the devil on the left shoulder, okay? This is all about the devil and the angel being at odds, right? And your ego, yourself, is in the center, okay? So the ego is your largely conscious mind, right? It functions as the executive between the devil and the angel. And your ego mediates the demands of the id and the superego, okay? It operates on the reality principle, and it's right in the here and the now. I need to make a decision that's practical for reality, right? For my life. That's how your ego is operating, right? Your devil is unconsciously telling you to do the bad thing, and your angel is constantly striving for you to do the right thing. The devil is the unconscious part, right? It strives to satisfy those basic central and sexual demands. Those aggressive drives are operating on what we call the pleasure principle, demanding instant, immediate gratification, okay? So the devil is, I want it, and I want it now, and I don't care if you don't like it or you don't want it, I want it, and I'm gonna have it, and I'm gonna have it now. That's the way the id operates. The superego then is your angel side, and it provides standards for judgment, right? It's your conscience. It's the moral part of you, right? It's for future aspirations, and it operates on the moral principle. Okay, the morality being the good angel, the good part of you. Freud believed that personality development formed during life's first few years. He divided it into the psychosexual stages. During these psychosexual stages, there are pleasure-seeking energies you focused on. Pleasure-sensitive body areas are called erogenous zones. And no, it's not only the genitals, but you've got to think about it, and I'll kind of help you through the stages here. What's going on in the child's life as they develop. So Freud said our personality has developed really early on, and it just builds and builds throughout life. Here are the psychosexual stages. in order, what ages they are and what is significant within the stages. So the first stage is the oral stage. That is from birth to about 1 year old. So think of a child when they are an infant, right? They're absolutely consumed with their mouths. They're either using a pacifier, a bottle, a mother's breast, the sucking reflex, they're biting, they're teething, right? Everything is all about oral pleasure, okay? Not sexual pleasure, just satisfaction by eating, talking, using a binky, helping to soothe him with breastfeeding or the bottle, okay? In this stage of development, a lot of things are going on with the mouth. They're 1 year old now, and of course, whatever they put in their mouths, they feel the pleasure of all the different feelings, whether that's cold or warm, or they're about 1 year old. And of course, everything, including their own hand, is in their mouths constantly, especially if they're sucking on their thumb. So between ages 2 and 3 is the anal stage. What's going on in a child's life? Just look for that answer and you'll know the stage. It's all about being potty trained, okay? Learning to use the potty properly so you won't have to wear diapers anymore. It's all about the pee and the poo, right? So pleasure is obtained by learning to control the bodily wastes and putting them into the proper places. The third stage is the phallic stage. And I don't want you to just go Googling phallic symbols, but phallic symbols come from the Greek god when it was an erect penis. And that's kind of awkward, but it applies here. So from ages 3 to 5, this being the most crucial state, according to Freud, is that children are curious here about their genitalia, okay? They deal with their incestuous feelings. Yes, I said incest. And I am serious, okay? It's awkward to talk about, but little boys and girls, according to Freud, wanted to marry their mommy if they were a boy, and little girls start to be obsessed with their dads, and they say to themselves, what does daddy have that mommy doesn't have and that I don't have? And of course, that's the penis. And they're super curious about all of that, as they should be, right? They should learn all about themselves and the human anatomy. And we shouldn't be embarrassed about talking about this with our children, right? If you do get embarrassed, they form a complex. And this is coming from some other Greek mythology. Okay, so the Oedipus complex is, Freud believed that all little boys had these incestuous feelings, okay? And the complex, right, the young boy, we're talking 3 years old to 5 years old, has unconscious feelings of sexuality towards his own mother. And that little boys with the Electra complex, a whole nother Greek mythology about little girls wanting to kill their mothers and marry their fathers. We'll get into that another time. It's a little kooky, I admit, but that's how we come up with the Oedipus complex, where all little boys want to marry their mother and kill their daddies, okay? And you see it play out, actually, in a much more subdued way, right? Daddy comes home from work and mommy gives daddy all the attention, and the baby doesn't get the attention anymore, and they go over and they kick daddy, and they say, no, mommy's mine, and hugs mommy's legs and keeps mommy away from daddy, right? They all go through this little version of what we're talking about here. There's a little bit of that if you really think about it, okay? With little girls, the same thing. When daddy comes home and kisses mommy, she might push mommy out of the way and say, no, I want daddy to pick me up, not you, mom. What Freud called castration stories. And every Greek mythology story, right, there's the biggest fear of punishment is castration. And if dad finds out that I have these feelings, right, it might be the reason little boys prefer their mommies to put them to bed, or that mommy makes them that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right, and not daddy, because something like that might happen. Okay, the Electra complex being what Karen Horney felt was a very applicable name for the female version of the Oedipus complex. The idea here being that the little girl has those feelings towards dad and hates mom, and now identification is the end of a phallic stage, where the child copes with all of those threatening feelings by repressing them down and then identifying with the rival parent, the same-sex parent. So basically, if you can't beat them, join them sentiment, okay? They start to recognize, like, yeah, as a little boy, that's pretty cool, or as a little girl, mom's pretty cool. So through this process of identification, big vocab word here, the superego gains some strength by incorporating the parent's values along the way. And then we have here what is the fourth stage of the latency, okay? The latent. There's that word again. This is the latent stage, which is 5 years old to 12 years old. And this is supposedly where all of the sexual interests come from, right? From elementary school to middle school. If you're a boy, you play with the other boys, and girls have the cooties, right? And if you're a girl, you play with other girls, and the boys have the cooties, okay? So when you move on to channel stage, 12 and up, wraps up around puberty and up. So this is where you enter the stage of adult sexuality. You're expressing your sexual feelings towards other people now. Fixation is an important vocabulary term for when a traumatic event occurs. One can become stuck in a particular stage of their psychosexual development. So for instance, if a child becomes fixated in the oral stage, they tend to grow up seeking excessive oral contact. They might talk a lot. They're always smoking and drinking and eating and chewing, and their hair is in their mouth and their strings from their hoodies are in their mouth. They're chewing on their pencil, okay? You might have not resolved something in your oral stage if you're having fixations like that. According to Freud, this means that you didn't properly go through your oral stages and now you're fixated on things in your mouth, okay? There's also an anal fixation where you could be anal retentive. If you're very controlling and a very tidy, orderly person, a lot of people call this OCD, which is completely incorrect, but you know, what they mean to say is to expulse of being messy, disorganized, right? The opposite of that spectrum is anal expulsion. Right? They want to expulse the feeling of being messy and disorganized, right? It's the opposite. So either of those spectrums or extremes would be an anal fixation. Okay, next we have defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms, Freud said that when our id and our superego are at odds, they're very much butting heads. Our ego, our self, has to essentially compensate. It has to use our defense mechanisms to cope with the anxiety-causing events. So, methods used by the ego to unconsciously protect itself against the anxiety caused by the conflict between the id's demands and the superego's constraints. They're unhealthy when they cause self-defeating behaviors and emotional problems. In fact, a lot of these can be rather healthy, like rationalization, until they become self-defeating. When you start rationalizing a really bad habit, no, I'm just biting my nails down until they're bleeding so that I don't have to think about work tomorrow. Okay? Not good. Repression is one of the biggest defense mechanisms, and it's when we avoid painful thoughts by forcing them into the back of our minds. This underlines all other defense mechanisms. We are repressing in some fashion and all of the defense mechanisms. An example would be a person who, say, witnesses a murder, and they don't remember the details when they are asked by the police to recount their witness statement, because their consciousness, right, their mind, their ego can't deal with the trauma. so that the mind represses or pushes down what you witnessed. The scene that you saw was so hard to witness, it'll go back into your unconscious. Regression, on the other hand, is when your behavior, regression, on the other hand, has to do with your behavior. Okay, so regression is when we retreat to behaving or thinking like we did when we were children in order to avoid any adult issues. Okay, so you might be in a shopping center and they don't have the item that you want, and you called ahead of time, and you start throwing a temper tantrum and screaming at the salesperson in order to try to get what you want, right? That's not an appropriate way for an adult to behave, right? Especially if somebody's meeting you with, you know, a very calm and soothing personality and maybe being apologetic, and here you are screaming your face off, and you think you'll get what you want even as an adult. Displacement is when you divert sexual or aggressive impulses to a more acceptable person or object. You're angry at your mom, right? She took away your cell phone. So you take that anger out on, say, I don't know, the family dog by yelling at him when you come in the door, or you go to kick him out of the way or shoo him out of the way. Something like that is not very nice, right? But instead of yelling at your mom, somebody that's, you know, not going to take your yelling very kindly, you displace the yelling onto a less threatening animal, or maybe a little smaller sibling. But please don't kick your animals, even if you're in a really bad mood. Okay, so projection. Think about projection like projectile, right? When an object flies into the air and lands on something else, okay? When you project your feelings onto something else, you're disguising the threatening impulses by attributing them to others. Okay, so it's how you truly feel, but you project them and you say that someone else feels that way. An example would be like, say you really want to break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and so you accuse him of wanting to break up with you, right? You blame him or her of the same thing that you are really wanting to do in order to get him or her to start thinking about it and planting the seed and letting it ruminate so that you don't have to do the breaking up, right? You projected it onto them. They'll be like thinking, maybe something's going on here. Maybe I should break up with her, or maybe I should break up with him. Okay, sublimation is next. Sublimation is, think like substitution, right? We substitute, we expend energy on socially acceptable or pro-social activities in order to avoid undesirable activities. So for an example, you might like to hit things, okay? But hitting things is not socially acceptable. So you go and take up a kickboxing class so that you can kick and you can fight and you can punch and you can slap, right? You take up boxing as a hobby, right? So it's a much healthier way to release the feelings of wanting to hit something. Reaction formation is when you form your reaction to the opposite what is truly so. So you have these unacceptable impulses and you make them into their opposite acceptable forms, right? So maybe you don't really, I don't know, let's just say you don't like your physics teacher, okay? And even though you don't like her or him, you hang around after school and you try to make jokes with him and you tell him how he's your favorite teacher. You talk about how great of a teacher they are, how much you can't wait to do the projects with him, okay? Rationalization is up next. I would argue that rationalization is probably the most common defense mechanism, right? We try to create logical explanations for our behavior in order to justify it. An example being, let's say you want to go to the movies with your friends. So you justify it by saying that, oh, I'm not going to study tonight. I probably would have failed anyway, so I might as well go and have fun with my friends. right? You're rationalizing one thing in order to make you not feel guilty about the thing that you're supposed to be doing. I can see my best friend anytime. I really like this guy, so I'm going to tell her that I'm staying home to study, and then really I'm going to go hang out with this guy. Not nice. Not a very nice rationalization, is it? So, denial is another pretty famous one, right? Self-explanatory. It's when we consciously refuse to accept what is true. We refuse to perceive the reality in order to protect ourselves from it. An example might be that you don't get into the AP class that you wanted to really have, right? And let's just say it's AP music, and you've been playing an instrument your whole life, and that's your segue into Juilliard, and the teacher, for whatever reason, didn't pick you, okay? You walk around pretending like there is no way I'm not getting into that class, and I'm just gonna act like I got accepted into the class, and I'm gonna show up on the first day, I'm gonna do the summer assignment, and he's gonna have to take me. Okay, that would be a serious example of denial. Stages. Okay, we're going to talk about the Neo-Freudians. So the Neo-Freudians, and this is where the psychoanalytic becomes psychodynamic perspective, okay? They don't necessarily buy into all of what Freud was saying, but they do use it for a base of what they believe as a starting point. So Alfred Adler believed in childhood tensions, which is another name that you have to have, right? He believed in these childhood tensions. However, these tensions were social in nature and not sexual, okay? Freud, where he was always thinking that everything was something sexual, he believed in that a child struggles with what he calls the inferiority complex during growth and strives for superiority and power. And if you think about a child, it can't really make any decisions for themselves if the parent doesn't let them, say, strive for that in other ways and they'll kind of overcompensate and make sure that they puff their chests out and show their power in other ways. Karen Horney, a really applicable name for this perspective of the Neo-Freudians, believed in the social aspects of childhood growth and development. Okay, so children are trying to overcome a sense of helplessness. She countered Freud's assumption that women have weak superegos and suffer from something that Freud called penis envy. Penis envy, according to Freud, he would argue that when women currently see the power that men have, they think to themselves, well, what does he have that I don't have? Yeah, he's got the power, but he's also got a penis, and I don't have one of them. So Freud translated that into, if a woman is really power hungry, they're said to have penis envy, and that they would, if they really would want to become powerful, they would want the same genitalia that men have, because then they can be powerful too. Karen Horney said that that was simply ridiculous. Okay, Carl Jung. So another Neo-Freudian was Carl Jung, another huge name in psychoanalysis. He believed in what he called the collective unconscious. Okay, it contained a common reservoir of images derived from our species' past, and it was filled with things called archetypes. Okay, archetypes are universal symbolic images that appear across all cultures and mythology, with art and in stories and in literature. Right? One example would be the dark antagonist against the hero or the protagonist, right? Like Darth Vader, for example. In Superman, we have the Joker, right? And all of these sort of mythical creatures or mythical figures are in all sorts of stories and the Bible and mythologies across cultures, okay? In Superman, right, he's the protagonist, the hero, where Joker is the anti-hero or the antagonist, Okay, and so we assess these unconscious processes, like how do we test them? How do we figure out what's going on with an individual? So we evaluate their personality, right, from an unconscious mind perspective, which would require a psychological instrument. And he used what was called a projective test that would reveal the hidden unconscious mind. So there are two main projective tests. One is the thematic apperception test, and one is called a Rorschach inkblot test. Okay, put those in your notes. Once you take a couple of notes on what a projective test is, really quickly, it's not a multiple choice test. The TIT by Henry Murray is a projective test in which people express their inner feelings and interests through the stories that they make up about ambiguous scenes that are shown in an illustration. Okay, an ambiguous scene like this one here. And then they're told to say, tell me what's happening in this picture, right? Well, that could go any way, right? He could be taking a nap. You know, she's really tired and exhausted because her babies won't go to sleep. Or maybe he just died and she is weeping over there about the fact that she just lost him, right? Every story that is told to you reveals a part of your personality. And what's going on in the pictures are just some more examples. Here are some more examples of the Rorschach inkblot test. You've probably seen these at some point, whether it's in a movie or some kind of background art that people use when they're talking about psychology in their YouTube videos and stuff like that. Okay, a Rorschach projective test is 10 ink blots that were designed by Herman Rorschach, and it sought to identify people's inner feelings by analyzing their interpretations of the ink blots, after which they are asked, what do you see? Right? Like, do you see a bat or do you see a butterfly in these cloudy ink blots? What do you see in this ink blot? What does it reveal about your personality if you say the bat? And what does it reveal about your personality if you say butterfly? There have been lots of criticisms about these projective tests. They lack reliability and validity, and they're not consistent in their results because each person has a different answer. What they predict, though, what they're supposed to predict, even a trained rater evaluates, even when trained evaluators or raters evaluate the same patient, they come up with different interpretations, and that would be a lack of reliability. Okay, so the projective tests may misdiagnose a normal individual as pathological, which then means that it's invalid. So just some criticisms of projective tests. Okay, well, that's all I've got for you tonight. Bye now.